A heartfelt appreciation to Jimmy Agent R07 for granting permission to narrate this story. Be sure to find their details in the description below. Without further ado, let's delve into the tale. There was little presumed mystery about the humans. First contact was made, some simple trades and exchanges, and little else. The Yukali were wary, but not afraid. The humans were dangerous pack hunters, while the Yukali were herd animals. Yet the humans showed no hostility towards them, so they assumed they had simply civilized past their hunting instincts. That was until the lyrics showed up. The few humans that had been on Yukali hadn't even been military, and yet fought with a ferocity that terrified both sides. The war that followed moved on, and eventually ended in an unconditional surrender. What surprised the Yukali more than how the humans reacted to the attack was how they made peace after. A new state was created, one where the lyrics could govern themselves. The humans, after, went back to their friendly, peaceful selves. After that, there was a significant influx of trade, tourism, and immigration. Everyone wanted human friends around, not just for protection, but because they always seemed up for anything they might need. A human mechanic could fix a town's water supply before the herds could convene a meeting to invite another herd with a member with the appropriate skills. That is what Sheriff Nita Feng kept reminding himself while reading the immigration papers. The human moving into his 3-herd town was a mechanic. He didn't even have any former occupations with the military. His new job title was another human thing he was still getting used to. Typically, older herd members tended to do better independently and wandered a bit to solve problems between the herds. It was a position of authority that the humans named for him. They did like putting names on things. In an effort to distract himself, Nita Feng got out of his pod and left the papers on the small desk. He had landed on the outskirts and shivered at the sight of the old forest 100 meters away. It was hardly safe, so he trotted up to the herd home. The humans started calling them barns before their diplomatic authority stopped them, calling it offensive. Nita Feng didn't think so when he looked up the word, but humans always seem to go out of their way to avoid such things. Inside, he could see the family in distress. What appears to be the matter? Our herd has kin in the capital across the forest, so we sent out a pod for a youngling to meet her cousins. The pod was returning, but it is not here, the mother replied. Nita Feng shifted on his hooves uncomfortably. Could it have returned to the capital? Gone in the wrong direction? No, Cousin Herd saw it fly over the forest towards us, watched her leave, came the chilling response. A pod carrying a child goes missing in the forest. There was nothing they could do. Nita sat in her pod where she was told to sit. The door was open and she could only see trees around her where she had landed. She wondered why her herd wasn't there to meet her. Maybe they were late. She figured she would need to wait a little while. The sheriff sat in his pod. He thought about flying it over the forest, but he wouldn't be able to see below him, and the tree covers would be too thick to find a landed pod, even if he could. If the child had wandered in, he could go to the edge and call for her. That would at least be something, but deep into the forest would be impossible. Dangerous predators lurked there. Even a whole herd wouldn't live long if it wandered in, if it even knew where to go. His eyes fell to the papers on his desk. Hunters were simply too dangerous for him. He imagined hundreds of humans roaming the forest in lieu of any notion of what actual predators there were. A thought crept into his wizened mind. Humans in the forest. His screen beeped at him and startled his thoughts. His alarm for when the human arrived had triggered it. He tapped a quick message for the human to come to him. As he waited, he considered what he might say. Nitise munched on the salad her grandmothers had made for her. She felt bad about not sharing it, but was hungry. It seemed to be taking her family a long time to pick her up. The human was smaller than Nita Feng, with fur on his head and face yet compact with dangerous potential. Only the casual sway about his walk put him at ease. Howdy, Sheriff. Something needs fixing already? The human gave a polite tip of his hat instead of a bone-crushing handshake. His friendly tone almost made one forget a human could be anything else. A child is missing, the sheriff blurted out. He noticed the shift in the human's posture instantly. Where? The casual tone was gone and it felt stone cold. We think the pod malfunctioned and landed in the forest. Nita Feng waved at the trees behind him. Does it have a locator beacon or remote control? The human asked, stern and concerned. No. He answered, suddenly realizing how useful that would be. Nothing like that. The human pinched the bridge of his nose and groaned before continuing. Do you not have a search and rescue team that can scan for the pod and go get them? Nobody goes into the forest, it's too dangerous. Even fighting herds stay away. Scanners are only on spaceships, aren't they? The human growled again as he pinched his nose. I need a name and picture of the child. Nita Feng brought the human into the barn and got one from the family. He used his device to capture the image and started working with it on their walk back. The human grabbed some things from his vehicle and started walking towards the forest. Stay here and let everyone know this is the right spot, the human called out. What do you mean? He asked, but got no response as the human started running into the forest. Nitis hopped off the seat and started to pace around the pod. Trees were everywhere. Sounds were all around her. She sighed and continued to wait. The sheriff was still standing confused well after the human disappeared into the forest. It wasn't until a noise behind him startled him that he turned around. It was a heavy human vehicle. A bus, they called it, with 2 levels. They drove around the popular cities to show off all the sights to the human tourists. When it stopped, he could read on the screen that it was supposed to be showing the coastline stone formations, and they were far off the map. Human families poured out of the vehicle in a frenzy of activity. Some were older, some much younger, a collection of small herds, it seemed. When one asked if they were in the right place for the missing child, Nita Feng simply nodded, knowing humans understood the gesture. The screen on the outside of the bus was changed to a map of the local area. He could see a small dot inside the forest moving deeper, while dots started appearing around him just outside. Humans began splitting off into groups of 2 while the youngest stayed behind. Older children were at the screen, talking to the groups and spreading them out. The humans didn't even complain, they just acted. Nitits was getting worried. Her salad was done and she still had not seen her parents. She had set off in the morning, and it was now well past midday. She had never been alone for so long before in her life. Nita Feng was dumbfounded at how many more human vehicles had shown up. The space was filling up where he was parked. Some human shuttles had even landed, in direct violation of air traffic control, who had been screaming at them before the humans screamed back. Air traffic control didn't talk anymore after that. The young humans were still busy directing teams into the forest, and the sheriff could see the pattern. An ever-expanding wave of humans simply marched into the forest. Some had weapons, but most did not. What really shocked him were the 2 humans with a pair of quadruped animals. They were covered in fur and followed the directions of the humans they were with. At a distance, they were scary, but as they came closer, they were terrifying. One was a black and brown pattern of fur that seemed the most dangerous. The other had short yellow fur, and the way his tongue hung lazily out the side of his mouth made him almost seem silly if not for the visible teeth. Excuse me, but you wouldn't happen to have something with the girl's scent on it, would you? The humans asked. They smell better than we do, but they need to know what to look for. It was too late to back out now. The sheriff went to the herd and got some clothing that only she would have worn recently. The humans seemed happy with that and went off into the forest. He wondered why the humans hadn't reported seeing any predators yet, but wondered if they would even recognize them as such if their domestic animals looked as they did. Humans continued to arrive. Even the human embassy showed up. Actual human soldiers were being briefed by the children and joined the search, with only the diplomats staying behind to talk to the media who had arrived. It was an odd sensation for Nita Feng to see that as different as their 2 species were. They both had politicians who acted precisely alike. Nitis turned the lights on in the pod as it got dark. She was hungry again, but didn't have any more salad. Her belly grumbled, and she was getting tired. Her mind wandered to when her herd took her to the human market and let her try a juice box, and was full of energy for days. It was forbidden shortly after by the herd. She had been rambunctious and had been made to see a doctor before he explained it was a common side effect of human foods containing tremendous energy. She wanted another juice box now. All the sounds in the forest suddenly stopped. It was night. Humans were still arriving. Food was being flown out on drones to the humans on the search. Landing lights are set up in impromptu landing sites. Even an asteroid prospecting rig had landed, undoubtedly forfeiting whatever shares they would have been collecting. A ship that would have had to travel from an entirely different orbit had shown up. Nada Feng had wondered what kind of animals humans considered predators and did some searching. He regretted it instantly. Bears, tigers, lions. It was staggering to think of anything evolving to compete with them. Lesser to those were the wolves, and the humans turned them into the dogs they brought with them. Trying to comprehend how humans survived, he looked around. This is how they did it. A single human could be dangerous, but many together are unstoppable. It didn't matter if they were in herds or packs. Few humans around him shared any familiarity with another, yet they all came. For a child not their own like his people were when they were attacked, a threat to one was a threat to all, and they all threw themselves at the threat. A missing child warranted the same response, a rallying cry for help, all of it to hunt down a single child and damn the expense. Nitis could hear things around her. She moved away from the pod. The light made her visible. She had to hide. She was too small to reach the door to close it herself. Into the bushes, she crept as forms appeared through the trees. Lanky, furless forms hopping along into the light. Their long snouts sniffed at the pod, slowly drawing towards her. There were several more around the pod. She froze, trying to go unnoticed, but they had her scent. Short hops towards her as they searched with their tiny eyes. Their mouths opened, and the hard sides of their mouths were bladed edges that chopped at the air to taste her smell. Nidis let out a soft whimper. She really wanted to try a juice box again. The noise attracted the whole pack, and they all hopped closer. Nitis wished they hadn't heard her. The rumbling of an approaching storm came from behind her and made her hope it might hide her. Closer, the danger approached. Nitis tried to look away, thinking the storm sounded too odd, as if it had to pause for a breath between each rumble. With one eye on the danger, her other faced the bushes. She was about to shut them both as the danger was only an arm's length away, but saw something in the bushes. A glint of light from the pod off some metal reflecting it. As the danger leaned closer, the storm pushed through the bushes and revealed it was another animal. It didn't look like the predator. It was covered in black and brown fur, and the sides of its mouth were soft and pulled back to reveal a long row of sharp bone teeth. The metal she had seen hung from a strap around its neck. Nitis didn't know what the human letters Mary meant, but she recognized the shapes. The danger hopped in for the kill and the storm exploded from the bushes. Nitis turned to see the storm beast with his mouth around the neck of the danger, whipping it back and forth, until letting it go and sending the limp form flying to crash against the pod. The others hopped in to get at the storm beast, but it moved faster than they could, getting around them, biting into them, and throwing them around. When one hopped closer to her, the bushes exploded again as another beast came between her and the danger. This one let his thunder rumble, but kept close to Nitis. He was pushing against her to shield her. A storm between her and danger. The yelps and cries of the danger amidst the rumbling storms ended as the danger fled. The one storm stood guard as the other turned to face her. This one had a tag that said Pippin on it. It licked her face, and his whole body wiggled as the big tail moved behind him. Nitis couldn't tell if the storm was moving the tail, or the tail was moving the storm. The other storm suddenly let out a long howl into the sky. Human voices came back, shouting as the storm started making shorter shouting noises. "Nitis," the human shouted as he burst through the brush. "Are you all right?" He paused to look at the carnage around him. Nitis giggled as she got more licks on her face. "I am all right." The human grabbed the animal near her by the face. "My good boy, who's a fool of a took, eh, good boy?" The other human was doing something similar before reaching into his bag. "Do you need anything?" the human near her asked. Natisse perked up with excitement. "Do you have a juice box?" As the other human fired something into the air and started working on his device, the one near her replied, Yes, I do." The howling had been chilling, heard by everyone who stopped in silence. 100 more humans getting ready to head into the forest were still at the sound. A bright green light went up into the sky. Sheriff Nita Feng didn't know what it meant. "Found alive," a child at the tour bus screen shouted, showing the image sent by the humans in the forest, wrapping the young Natisse in a blanket as she drank something clutched in her hands. There was half a moment of silence before a cacophony of noise. Every human around him and in the forest started screaming and cheering. They bellowed and hollered, as if the words they needed to express their feelings didn't exist, and compensated with noise. Some tore off shirts, others started to dance, and a few were on their devices calling out to others en route that their mission was a success. The intensity of the emotion was almost unbearable for the sheriff. Almost. The humans were showing Ntia Feng what he had to do. He climbed onto his pod, tossed the immigration papers he had been so worried about that morning into the air, and shouted, "Humanity! Fuck yeah!" The crowd somehow managed to get more noisy after that. It fed off itself. It didn't stop until the girl came out of the forest. She was riding on the yellow quadruped, whose trot could only be understood as happy. The silly tongue hanging out of his head, the girl was given over to her herd, who rejoiced at her return. The animals were rewarded with food and attention, as their humans explained what had happened. Slowly, the humans started to leave. Ships launched, vehicles drove away, politicians took credit, and all soon left except for the sheriff in the human's truck next to his pod. He was exhausted, but Nita Feng sat in his pod to wait for the human. It was light out when he woke up to the soft touch of the human beside him. "You are back," he remarked. "Yeah, got through to the other side, so I hitched a ride." He pointed to a departing pod. "Good news all around, I hear." "Sorry you weren't the one to find her," the human shrugged. "As long as she's found, it doesn't matter. I'm sorry I missed the party, though. I liked this part." Sheriff Nita Feng watched the news feed of him. He was too stunned to know how he should feel about it. Until he did. He smiled. They both watched him getting onto his pod, tossing the papers into the air, and shouting for all the universe to hear. "Humanity, fuck yeah." You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like on our channel. And for every comment that comments I enjoyed this story, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.